Hello, everybody. Let's have a mystical conversation, the kind where we lose ourselves in the wonders of divine mysteries, share dreams from the other side, intuitive nudgings, and soul mission yearnings. A mystical conversation is what happens when we lift above the everyday world, the ego mind, and review life from that higher place of divine inspiration, the soul's view. Hello, I'm Sue Frederick, your host, and I'm the author of 8 books, including the Angel Up series, and I See Your Dream Job and Through a Divine Lens. I'm an ordained Unity minister and a master numerologist, and my website is suefrederick.com. But I'm really excited because today I have the most wonderful guest, and I've gotten to know her because we're both part of a class, an angel class that we're putting together for a humanities team. So I've gotten to spend a lot of time in Zoom rooms with her, and you all are going to love her. She's an amazing soul. Um, Tricia Barker experienced a profound near-death experience during her senior year of college, and this experience guided her to teach overseas in public schools and at the college level. Her near-death experience story has been featured on I Survived Beyond and Back, Season 1, Life to Afterlife, Death and Back, National Geographic Magazine, Simple Grace Magazine, Women's World Magazine, Coast to Coast AM, Gaia, and the Dr. Oz Show. Tricia's memoir about this NDE is called Angels in the OR, What Dying Taught Me About Healing, Survival, and Transformation. It's available as an ebook, a paperback, and through Audible. Tricia is also a graduate of the University of Texas. She received her MFA in creative writing from Goddard College. She is a professor, an author, a medium, and a theta healer. Tricia also interviews other near-death experiencers, researchers, healers, spiritual teachers, and mediums on her YouTube channel. Again, it's Tricia Barker. So welcome, Tricia. So happy to have you here with us.
Yay, I'm happy to talk with you too. It has been such a joy putting that class together. It really is special to spend that much time talking
Yeah,
about angels.
it
I love it.
is. And it feels like the world really needs this right now. It's kind of like you used to be able to just get by focused on ordinary life. And but now ordinary life is so intense and there's so much going on that's so uh high frequency and low frequency, light and dark all at once, that these kinds of talks about angels and near-death experiences are more important than ever. So on that note, would you start with the day that it all happened? And you were how old again when this happened?
Yes, so I was a senior in college and I was about to graduate. So I was 21 when I had my near-death experience and I was set to go into law school. That was the path. And so I was on my way to run the Austin 10K. And if you know Austin, it's a big race and I had trained really hard. My life had emotionally become rocky. So a therapist had said, do something you love. And so running was what I loved. And I was ready to hit this race. Well, the weirdest thing happened, and I didn't put this in my book because I didn't want to confuse people, but time is relative. And I believe when we have soul programs and things that must happen in our life, we become kind of outside of time. So I had many nightmares right before the race. I woke up and I could hear my father screaming, "Watch out!" And my mother going, "Oh no, 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 no." And I woke up in this cold sweat and I was like, ugh, I got to get to the race. And I didn't have time for coffee. I gunned it, just jumped in my car. And I knew the first light was yellow. By the time I was going under the second light, though, I realized it was red. And then the other person had probably jumped the gun coming around the corner, and we hit each other at about 60 miles an hour. He was in a big SUV. Luckily, he wasn't hurt too badly. I was badly hurt. My car crunched up, and I remember I'd never broken a bone, never had, any major illness. I grew up without health insurance. I was just this strong country kid. And all of a sudden, I was like against the side of the door and couldn't lift my body up. And I knew, oh God, there's so much that's wrong. Maybe my neck's broken, maybe my back's broken. I can't move. My legs were tingling, and I feared that, I wouldn't walk, just laying there. But most of all, we needed an ambulance. So, the physical trauma that leads to an NDE is horrible. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't wish it on my worst enemies, but the body does protect itself somewhat. You go into shock, and I didn't feel everything, but certainly time slowed down. I was agnostic, and so I only thought of spirituality in terms of religion, and I really did not like the religious people that I had grown up with. I kind of saw through their BS, in certain ways. As a child, I just argued with the Bible. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I was like, submit to men, those boys, no, thank you. Like I'm smarter than them. Like
That's
there was
great.
always just this like cattiness I
Hmm.
had as kind of like an old soul.
Hmm.
So education, science mattered way more to me at that time than anything spiritual. But I did freak out. And so I remember before the ambulance got there, I just said a little prayer like, oh, if there is a God beyond all that religion, please help me. I don't know how I'm going to get through this day, because I knew it was going to be bad. And it was. I waited 17 hours for a surgeon, and I was just strapped down to a board, screaming and crying. And I knew at some point after MRIs and CAT scans that I had internal injuries and a back injury that was really pretty bad. My mid back was fractured into many different pieces, and they wouldn't give me painkillers because I had to go into surgery. Well, eventually this surgeon came by, and she was off duty, and I knew I had to convince her to operate on me. And it turns out she was head of surgery, and she was doing brilliant work, and Dr. Flan was her name. And I remember thinking, oh, she's just a few years older than me. We kind of resemble each other. Cool, I have a female surgeon. And and she's going to take me in. She had to go rest for a bit and then wheeled me in to surgery. The next thing I knew, they always make you count down, and the anesthesiologist, I think I got, a few numbers in, maybe to 97, and then it was just dark. The very next thing I knew, I was above my body, and my body was face down because they were working on the back, and my back and hip was completely opened up. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a lot of blood. Like that looks like the Civil War type of documentaries I've seen,
Hmm.
where the I'm losing blood. But the next thing I realized is my consciousness goes on. I was wrong. And I swear I was so excited, Sue. Like I thought that's all I needed. I thought
Right.
I'd come back and tell every agnostic and atheist friend, like we go on. I am certain of it, because it felt so much more real than the body. And that's the first thing that hit me. The next thing was seeing the angels behind the surgeons. So I was kind of like above my body looking down. And when I saw the angels, they were nothing like I had ever imagined. And I know you work with angels, so
Mhm. Mhm.
I was dumbfounded. I
Yeah.
was like in awe. And I knew that they were communicating telepathically with my soul to calm me down and to say, this is normal. This is, just feeding me peace and information. And I knew it was very high level information and that I couldn't take it all in that moment, but I understood how to operate outside of my body.
Mhm.
And I also was fascinated by what they were doing. And they were working through the surgeons on my body. And as they sent this light through the back of the surgeon's hands into my body, they said, watch this. And my whole body lit up with light, the spine lit up, and they assured me that they would help the doctors pick the bone fragments out that were pressing on my spine and were causing me to lose feeling in my left leg, because I had lost complete feeling in the left leg. And that terrified me. I thought,
Yeah.
well, I can not walk.
Yeah.
And I loved running. Running was my escape from emotional turmoil and pain. That was how I kind of outran
Hmm.
life. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I'll run. Okay, I'll come back then. That's all right. That's cool. Like if I'm going to survive this, then, running is important.
Hmm.
And they were like, yeah, it's going to be fine. But then the monitor flatlined, and we've all seen
Yeah.
those moments. And I even understood in that moment, like, oh, I was out of body. Now I'm dead. Like now this body's dead.
Hmm.
And I had heard about near death experiences actually. And so I knew actually what was happening. And I was like, well, I'm not going to sit around and watch, like my body, there's things to go see. So I was outside of the hospital room, saw my stepdad get a candy bar, and I didn't really know him. My mom had remarried when I was in college, and I thought, hope they're happy, hope they're good to each other. But that's funny that he has a sugar addiction, like
Yeah.
it's hidden. And then I was above Austin, and I felt this oneness with everyone I'd ever known. And that's such a good feeling. You realize that most people at their heart are very good, that most people just want simple happiness and simple joy, that we're fed all kind of information, but
Yeah.
at the heart of things we're kind of simple.
Hmm.
And that's what I felt, was this love, this simple love for everyone, that I'd ever known, even just in a glimpse. And I also, for some odd reason, felt like I knew everyone in Austin. Like it was, I didn't get that oneness with the world,
The
but I got it with
grid, the
Austin.
grid of connection that we're all part of, right?
Exactly. And many years later, I will see people and ask them in Austin if they lived there during that time, and I swear to God, they're familiar.
I love
Like,
that. You were seeing souls. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, as I was in that space over Austin, it's a beautiful city, just kind of flying around in the night sky. I didn't feel fear. It was exciting. I think we all want to be a bird or
Yeah.
fly around, like
Yeah.
there's freedom in that. But then I thought, oh, there's more. Let's see. And then in a split second, I was in space, kind of like what's behind you,
Hmm.
just the beauty of the stars and scenes that I'd never seen before, so vivid, that kind of look like the Carina Nebula, now that those telescope images are coming back. And that means that in a split second, I was millions of light years away from Earth. But it felt normal. It just felt like, oh, well, my consciousness thought about it, and you just decide to be there, that you're not contained to body, you're not contained to a body or time.
Hmm.
I also felt this light growing, this light intelligence coming toward me, which I knew was probably God, or, source, or whatever you want to call it. But it was far away. It was like a glimpse of it. It wasn't quite there with me yet. And yet I was being informed by it. And God, if you were source, showed me parts of my life and showed me the parts that were good. Childhood, I mean, most children have faith and have joy and have good times in nature. And so I saw a lot of scenes like that. And I saw myself questioning God outside of religion, and praying to God and saying, God, if you're real, show me some rabbits. And these rabbits showed up, and I was almost in the lotus position as a kid, and they were playing all around me. I was like, God is real. God works through nature. God works in magical ways. And God said, yeah, I was there. I was talking to you, that this is a real thing. And then I understood that these signs are not just silly signs, that's God working through things. And then I saw later, I became very much like the religious people I judged, that I judged in a different way. And I judged people based on their shoes and their degrees and their clothes, and, just.
So you were having a soul review,
Mhm.
pretty much complete, it sounds like. Did it bring you all the way up to the current day?
Yeah, it did. It wasn't it kind of looked at highlights. So I think when we transition and we're there,
Hmm.
we get every possible choice. But for
Hmm.
me in that soul review, it was, hey, go to nature, be joyful, but don't judge others.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
look into their hearts and get to know the truth of who people are inside, not
Hmm.
the outward opinions and not their degrees and not who they are. Just see people's hearts. And my soul felt chastised, and I not in a bad way, but I judged myself and I was like, you can be better than this. You can do so much better. And when you return, you will. And so it was more just a, grow up, kind of
And you
moment.
were only 21, which is when most of us are kind of at our worst behavior.
Yes. Yeah. And what's funny is none of the drinking or partying or premarital sex or even a suicide attempt was shown to me as, you're wrong or you're sinning. It was more just this, oh, that's a darkness and a fear and a sadness. Don't be bad to yourself. It was more just love yourself, be good to yourself.
Mm.
That was the compassion. It wasn't you're wrong, and I think that's the energy that people need in order to heal is you're
Yeah.
loved.
Well, I love this because every time I interview an NDEer, they always tell me about this soul review, and they tell me that they were shown their mistakes, but in such a loving way that it empowered them to just do better next time rather than making them feel bad.
Exactly, exactly. Even the things that perhaps we would be judged by others, God didn't judge. God was like, "Oh, just love yourself more. If you love yourself more, you won't make those choices."
Right.
And it was deeply healing. It just seemed like generations of broken people had raised broken people, and
Mhm.
God was the healer. And I was like, okay, got it. And then I transitioned into what I call like a holding place, but I love the grass behind me. The grass in heaven was so dynamic. Even the blades of grass sung with music, and the grass was so beautiful. And I got it. I was like, nothing ever dies.
Right.
Everything is eternal. Like we fear everything that we see dying, from the grass and the trees and our animals and our loved ones to ourselves. And then my grandfather appeared, and I didn't recognize him at first. He was very young and handsome, and
Right.
I was like, "Oh, it's you, my grandfather, who was so loving." And in that moment, he just gave me this assurance that he would be with me through life, but in spirit. And it was peaceful. At some point, he said, "Do you want to go on towards God?" And I was like, "Who doesn't want to meet God?" Of course I
So
do.
did you say yes and then they pushed you back?
Well, I said yes, and I flew towards God, and I felt people's prayers trying to pull me back, and I broke through them, and I was like, I'm going to God. And as I got closer and closer, I was like, oh, I don't want to come back. This feels so good. So all the pain of this earth started to leave me. And many near-death experiencers cry when they think of God because there is nothing that compares. It's not like we're suicidal, but nothing will ever compare
To that
to
love. Yeah.
nothing, nothing. And I've heard parents say that even their love for their kids,
Right.
rivals that to a large degree, that it was the best feeling.
Yeah.
I still think about it. If there's anything I would give to people, it's just that one moment, like what God feels like. And then I was like, yeah, yeah, no, I'm not coming back. Like, we're going to stay right here. And then, bam, I hit this wall, and God said, look down. And, what is God's voice? I see why people say he, because it's booming. The
Yeah.
voice is undeniable, but it's not really masculine or female.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
feminine, it's a vibration,
It's
but
a
it's
vibration. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
strong vibration, like thunder, that just like, woke
Mhm.
my soul up and said, look down. And I saw a river of souls, and it looks so simple. There's either fear or love. And I was like, oh, okay. So when someone's acting bad, they're just in fear. When they're acting good, they're in love. And it has nothing to do with anything other then stay in the light, stay in the
Yeah, that
light.
is so similar to this vision behind me that I had in 2014 when I was just sick. I didn't die that I know of, but I was sick. They showed me the river of light of souls traveling around the world. I mean, and they were showing me that everyone's soul is light, you know? And I love it when everybody sees the same thing on the other side. The world needs to pay attention.
Yeah, that is wild that you saw that. I've heard a couple of river stories, and
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, I didn't know what to make of the symbolism, but I understood that souls were light as well,
Yeah.
and that what fear is kind of like a shadow
Yeah.
that just kind of dims your light.
And the
And
light always overcomes that darkness. You know, that simple truth of the spiritual plane is kind of the answer to all of our problems. You
yes,
know, we look at
yeah,
our lives and think, oh, I'm so unworthy. I've done so many terrible things. And then the universe goes, just open your heart and be light, and you overcome all of that darkness. It's really so metaphysically simple, but we make life here seem so complicated and difficult, you know?
I know. And when you operate in those simplistic terms, miracles happen, and
Right.
that is the miracle. So I
Right.
was so happy that I saw that, even though it is challenging to come back to
Yeah.
3D. And that is when I was sent back. I actually argued, this is horrible, but I argued with God, and I was like, no, no, keep me here. I don't want to go back to that. No, 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 not going to be a
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah.
No, no, no. And I was thrown back into my body, and I really felt like God had a sense of humor, just like,
Yeah.
we're throwing this one back. that,
That's so great.
that ego is going to have to get beaten around a little, you know.
Yeah. Well, actually, you came back, beautiful Tricia, because you're an 11 master soul in numerology, double 11, and you agreed to come here to be one of the angels here on Earth. That's part of the 11 path master soul journey that you are walking in this lifetime. So they just tossed you right back and said, get to work, girl.
Oh, it's interesting to know it's 11/11. How interesting.
Mhm.
It did feel holy. I had one little moment of self-pity once I was back in my body, and then I was like, no, I have a mission here. And how cool that God's my guidance counselor.
And I think it's important that you tell the listeners that you got a validation that you were out of your body because you saw your stepdad getting that candy bar. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I did ask my surgeon, there's lots of little validations. I asked her how long was I dead. She
Mhm.
said, we thought you were dead for a couple of minutes, but I really got this sensation she didn't want to talk about it. And it didn't hit me, that seeing my stepdad was a verifiable moment, but IANS loves those moments. And so many years later, I think 2010 or 11, when I joined an IANS group, they were excited, like, oh, you had validation. Unfortunately, my family is very religious. And so there's not ever going to be a podcast where they're talking with me. They
Right.
think I'm going to hell because I'm a medium. They think I'm, like,
Yeah.
just off the deep end.
Well, you're
And
their teacher.
yeah, it it is sad, but it's also, I look back to those moments of
Mhm.
recovery at their house, and I'm very grateful to both of them. My mom and stepdad provided a place for me in a body cast to
Mhm.
heal and read spiritual materials and kind of integrate all this sudden knowing.
Yeah.
I went from agnostic to
And it
blown
is
wide open.
amazing that the angels and the guides and God made it so that you were so injured that when you came back in your body and got home from the hospital, you were in your mom's house. You had to give up your apartment because, in a way, that's as much as we never want to move back home. In a way, it puts us in a cocoon of really reinventing ourselves. And, if you had gone right back to your apartment and your friends were there and normal life for you began, it wouldn't have had the same cocooning effect for you to really reflect. And I remember you said in your book that you changed your career direction because of this. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, so part of what I had heard in heaven was that I needed to be a teacher and, spiritual teacher down the road, but actual teacher in school systems. And I was like, oh no. At first, I couldn't stand the idea of that because the pay was so low and it was a
Right.
traditional career. And I was like, no, this is not what I want to
Right.
do. But the minute I accepted it and went through the process, I
Mhm.
knew exactly why I was there. It was like I was the only one seeing these kids and giving a lot of them, especially junior high and high school students, love when they were at very pivotal points in their
Yeah.
life.
They
And
got an angel to teach them. Boy, that is really sacred work. You got a whole redirect from that NDE, and the world is a better place for it, you know?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
know that
I
it
was better.
Yeah, and I know it takes a long time to recover from those, so I know that for a while probably you went through your ups and downs and everything. But talk about what brought you to now, all these years later, do mediumship work, do angel work. How did all that evolve for you?
Yeah, well, I spent many years teaching junior high, high school, and then community college level, and it was joyful. Like I honestly felt as if God and the angels said that we're going to work through you. As long as you are teaching somewhere, we're going to be with you on this journey. And I felt carried, buoyed, like joyful doing that work. And I realized that clearly I never was depressed when I was teaching, that when life was centered on others, it was a good life
Mhm.
and a happy life. And that was a deep lesson. And I thought, at some point I was like, I got it. I was like, okay, so the rest of my life needs to be like that too. I don't just go to school and be the angel and then come home and,
Yeah,
be terrible to no, you have to care about everyone at all
right.
times and life works out. And the minute I had that thought, it was like maybe a few years later, I heard that booming voice again.
Wow.
And this time it said, your mission is done. And I was going through some health issues at that point, and I thought, oh, am I transitioning?
Right.
Is this
Yay, I get to go home.
it? Am I going home? But that wasn't it. It was just this deepening, I think, of spirituality and kind of at that point I started telling my story at IANS and then that kind of took off and
Yeah.
people were interviewing me in different places and when National Geographic interviewed me I thought, "Uh-oh, I really need to write this myself." Like
Yeah.
they kind of made me sound weird, like
Right. Right. Guess
just
what, Tricia? To the ordinary world, you and I are weird, but I claim that as my glory.
I know. But it just seemed they had this like headshot of me, and it said beneath it, she died for 2.5 minutes, and now she believes that the light works through her.
Don't you love the quotes, right? The light works through
Yes.
her.
And I was like, oh no, I got to do better than this. I'll write the book. And so in writing the book, I started connecting with
Yeah.
researchers and other NDEers and really becoming a part of that world. And then more and more people heard from me. And I was a reluctant medium because it blew up my marriage at the time. He
Yeah.
thought like, this is stupid. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
I
That
make
was
plenty of
just getting a
money.
little too weird for him, which is good because now the right partner comes in.
Yeah, maybe, but maybe not. And oh, I lost a lot of people with the mediumship. Some of my agnostic friends could handle, my near-death experience story, but mediumship, they were sending me, like all kind of information about how I was a fraud and just reading people. And, it didn't matter that I did complete blind readings and, like was able to get the information. They weren't convinced by any.
What's so interesting to me, Tricia, is because you're an 11 path master soul and you had this huge awakening, meaning that you weren't going to get out of this lifetime without getting to your great work, right? And that's what happens when you've signed up to be one of the accelerated souls here with a great gift for the world. But then as you travel through numerology, you probably hit like a 9 year cycle ending just when you were saying, well, I've got to let go of these people who don't believe in what I do, this relationship. And those 9 year endings are like cleaning out the closet. And the good news is for you, especially, and for all of us, is that when you stepped into the new you, you now have all these people who love you and see who you are and resonate with what you know to be true. That's our beautiful cycle of growth here. And you've said yes every step of the way.
Yeah, and it's not always easy to say yes, but it's
Yeah.
worth it. Like it's worth it. Sometimes the
Yeah.
fear comes up, and I remember standing in a literal field, and it felt like my fears were bulls just running at me, and I was like, well, then I'm going to be a matador, and I'm going to send them on.
Yeah.
Fear can go that way because the light is stronger, and really, whether you're sleeping on a friend's couch, sleeping in a guest room, whatever it is that you're doing to follow your path, it all does work out. And you're grateful for the little breadcrumbs that lead you,
Yeah.
to a different life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade helping moms who've lost their children.
Right.
That's what got me into mediumship as the
Yeah.
reluctant medium. Just I did it for free in the beginning, just until I got so busy. I was like, okay, this is a part-time job, like
Mhm.
we're gonna have to charge. But the seeing people stop drinking themselves to death, like develop their own connection to their loved ones, move in a different direction of helping others, who have suffered the same.
Mhm.
I think it's a grief that only parents can understand. I'm grateful to Helping Parents Heal and
Right.
organizations like that.
Yeah, kudos to Helping Parents Heal that we're both very involved with them. I agree with you. I think that when a parent loses a child, not only is it the biggest spiritual awakening you could ever walk through, but it's also the most, well, we could say the most devastating pain, but we can also look at it and say it's the fork in the road that you need a little help navigating. And, even the founder of HPH, Elizabeth, she says, when my son Morgan crossed, I knew I was at this fork in the road where either I go to bed every night with a bottle of vodka or I start seeking the spiritual truth of what is happening here, and that there is no death. And we all are grateful that Elizabeth quickly took that fork in the road and now she runs this huge organization helping parents connect to their children. So I love it that that's what you do and that you're a beautiful medium. I have another interesting question though, because when I was reading your book, Angels in the OR, which I recommend, that's a great book, um, a thought came to me and I want to know what you think of it because a year ago, I went through my cancer, my colon cancer diagnosis suddenly completely caught me off guard and I had to choose a surgeon. And, they were parading through my room and giving me all their titles and how great they were and what they were going to do. And my gut was like, no, 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 no. And all of a sudden, this woman I met, a surgeon, was connected to me, and she walked in the room, and my heart went, this is your angel. Say yes to her. Don't even worry about how she's going to do the surgery or whatever. And she was my angel, and I had a miracle. But what I'm asking is, when you gave me that picture in your book of the angels working through the surgeons, I wondered if when we pick a surgeon, we're picking a person that we know will not block that angelic connection and not kind of listen to it with their own ego getting in the way, and that an angel surgeon helps pour that through us. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've talked with many people now, and I interviewed someone who knows surgeons who work with their angels now. So there are surgeons, mostly
Mhm.
in I think the San Francisco area, who literally connect with them before surgery. And people have read my book, and I actually have some clients who are surgeons, and
Yeah.
when they face their own fear about mistakes, they have,
Hmm.
called on angels and what I believe to be true, even though my surgeon was agnostic, she was reaching for something that hadn't been done before. So she was,
Open.
yeah, she was open to miracles and she wanted to be the best possible surgeon to give young athletes a chance to return to their careers at college or professionally. And so to be at that level, you had to,
Yeah.
kind of break through some barriers around surgery at the time.
Yeah.
So she was young, she was open, she was trying to do a good job, and I think that helped her. And then the assistant, I don't know much about him, but I know that he believed in her work. And so there was a lot of belief in the work that they were doing. So sometimes, even when you're agnostic or
Hmm.
atheist and you
Yeah.
just
If
love the
you're
work
just
you're doing,
open. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's really a profound realization, a profound thing that you write about in your book is it's not even about picking the smartest doctor or the smartest surgeon. It's about picking someone who is open to receive whatever that means to them. Even if they don't believe in a God, if they kind of have that open-heartedness about them, they are maybe, and I'm just as an idea, maybe they are more clearly able to channel in those angel healers. I love that. And there's no coincidence that I met you after I did my surgery, um,
yeah.
because it's such a similar thing to hear you talk about the woman coming in and accepting you. And this woman surgeon came in recommended by a friend. And I even said to her in the doorway, I said, live, you're my person, live or die, it's by your hands. I trust you to be my angel. And she to this day kind of talks about me being her angel, and she's not
Oh,
Christian either. So I think it's an open-heartedness that maybe allows that angelic healing to pour through. But I also say, if it's not our soul exit point, it's not our soul exit point, and I firmly believe in that.
I know it sounds like you had quite a miracle. I mean, like most people,
So did you.
yeah, because it wasn't our point.
Right, exactly.
Here we
So
are.
here we
And
are teaching angel classes and working with parents who are grieving. I mean, what a great life, right? I mean, I just
yeah,
am so grateful every day for everything my pain has taught me, everything my grief taught me, and it continues. And you are doing such amazing work, and you're even I saw a book. I'm not sure if it was old, but it was about writing and poetry. Have you published books of poetry?
I have published poetry in different journals, but I honestly haven't spent too much time on it. Like during
Mhm.
the pandemic, I've put some books out, but I'm not very good at creating covers, and I didn't do it through the through the correct systems. But I love poetry. Poetry is my first love, and
Yeah.
I think it is for a lot of people. And so, that attention to detail and words, I always felt like maybe the angels can work through us, or our
Yes,
poets that we love on the other
of
side can work through
course.
us as we're
Don't
writing.
you feel that when you write and you get comfortable writing, that eventually you're really channeling in what you're supposed to be writing? I mean, not when we're thinking about it too much, but when we open up finally and let it come through us, especially with poetry. And I know you have to go back and edit it a lot, but that first image, that first draft, it can really feel if we've opened our hearts that it has poured in from the higher realms.
Yeah, and that's that connection to God. I mean, I think that's why people love creativity so much, is
Right.
it is that deeper connection. And I don't put limits on things. So, when people pull in famous people in mediumship readings. I'm like, cool, do it. I'm always trying to pull Rumi and Pablo Neruda,
Right, right.
and everyone that I love into my poetry. Why not?
That's so great.
If you're open, you never know who's going to come.
Yes, I love that. So, let's see, what would you say to people today watching this or listening to this who are going through grief, who are questioning if there is a God? What is your final advice to these people?
We're both the body and the higher self and the soul. So the body naturally feels trauma and shock and fear, when you're sick, when you get hurt, when you're dying, but when you leave the body, there is no fear. Like there's a huge difference between being in the body and being outside of the body. And all I can do is just assure you that there is no fear there. There is just love. There is like an elevated consciousness. So you don't lose any of your consciousness. You gain consciousness. You gain intelligence. I think people who are agnostic and atheists are sometimes very bright, like very gifted and intellectually,
Yeah.
and they fear losing their
Right,
mind.
their mental capacity. Yeah.
And
Well,
you
that
get
is
to
the
keep it,
greatest
but you just get
message.
more.
Yeah, that's the greatest message you can get, you can give the world. I mean, I remember counseling someone who was losing her sister. Her sister was dying from cancer, and she said, every time my sister has a cup of coffee, she cries about how she's going to miss that sensual pleasure. She'll, when she dies, she'll be gone. And from my experience, I was just telling her, no, everything is more vivid, more beautiful, more alive in the higher realms. And if people could really begin to grasp that, they wouldn't look at death as, oh, my poor beloved person didn't get to go to this graduation with me. Well, of course they were there and they were able to fly around and be with everybody.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely are there. I joke about reincarnation because
Mhm.
there are some strange limitations in that world. Like, because your consciousness sees things, like if you're golfing or you like a certain sport, if you keep seeing the hole in one, you keep making the hole in one. And so there's not as much struggle in learning, I think, on the other
Right.
side. And so sometimes people literally come back for the struggle. They come back, because they want to push against limits and try to hang on to all that beauty and majesty over there and bring more of it here. And that's why we come back. Maybe we come back for the Indian food and
Yeah.
like some of the food. But
So I have another thing. You're starting a one personal year in numerology this year in 2025. You're in a new cycle, and it's the cycle that's bringing you towards your second Saturn return, and you're in astrology, so you know all that. So what do you think is coming next in your life and work? Like, where are you headed? And also, how can the readers and the listeners find you?
yeah, well, you can find me on my website, Tricia Barker, NDE.com, and I'm sure you'll put the link below. But this is a fascinating year, Sue, because I can't fit myself back into systems that I am really accustomed to. Like, and I don't think it's terrifying in a way. It's another one of those starting over moments, but it's so beautiful. There's a big part of me that knows that all my resume should say is light worker at this point, like whether that's on a cliff and just like sending light to the world, whether that's from
Love
my
that.
car,
Yeah.
whether that's in any career or, continuing just in the spiritual work. I feel this deep calling that I have to be in a place that's beautiful and be in a place where I'm surrounded by support and be in a place where I can empower others with light
Yeah.
and in various ways. And so in the process of figuring that out, like kind of if you know tarot, and I'm sure you do, I'm the fool on the journey.
Going,
Like,
yeah. I love that so much. And that turning point we hit at that age that you're at, right before the second Saturn return, it is always so pivotal and so dramatic. And I remember for me, when in my path is different, my 9-year reinventions are different. But when I was turning 50, it was the end of a writing career that I had held on to for decades, where I was a health writer and paid quite well and had a lot of security and all of that, and accolades too. And when I turned 50, a number of things happened that suddenly that career was gone. And I felt like I was on the precipice of the cliff, really. And now I look back at that time 20 something years ago and I go, thank God that happened. I mean, I am finally really who I am and doing the work I came to do. So that's where you are on that cliff where you'll no longer carry any titles that aren't completely your sacred mission. Beautiful.
oh, thank you so much for sharing that, because we need wisdom on this path. Like I need to hear that right now, because it honestly feels like being 18 again, before college,
Right.
before any choices career wise. And it feels like I'm on a brand new adventure and
Oh,
I
it's so
don't know where it
good.
goes.
And if you decide that you're going to stay and live somewhere near me in Arizona, because I know you're looking at Sedona, I can't wait to have coffee with you.
Yes, yes. The energy here, I knew I had to come here. I just followed intuition. And I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out here. Either I'll stay or I'll figure it out. That there's something
Yeah.
that this place, it has always felt like the place I'll retire, or I'll end up. There's something beautiful about it.
Well, Arizona called me here and I had no idea why. So here we are doing our great work, and it's been such an honor to talk to you. And people can go to triciabarkernde.com to find you. And thank you so much, Tricia. I've cherished every moment of this mystical conversation.
Oh, me too, Sue. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.